So today the main goal of our argument at nuclear fission is to focus on how nuclear fission is far more practical and valuable for continued energy generation than nuclear fusion. Nuclear power plants are by and large capable of powering cities with relative efficiency and provide far more substantial energy output than any current available energy resource in use. Currently, nuclear fission reactors are spread out across the world in as many as 30 countries and make up for over 20% of the world's energy production. We feel this is an important thing to keep in mind because in this debate, we already know nuclear fusion does not even see any use yet in terms of energy production. It's theoretical. And I can't understate this enough because we are already losing nuclear fission. Ultimately, whether fusion is more appealing choice or not in the end, it's incredibly important to note that by the time it sees commercial use, it may not even be valuable enough to justify the cost.
All right, well, nuclear fusion. What is it? Because not too many people know what nuclear fusion is. A nuclear fusion reaction is one in which an atomic nuclei of a low atomic number fuse to form a heavier nucleus with a release energy, as you can see by the picture above. Nuclear fusion is a process of combining two hydrogen atom nuclei together. The atoms used in the fusion process are typically two hydrogen atoms, one being deuterium with one neutron and tritium with two neutrons. They are combined in a nuclear plant by colliding within a reactor with a very high temperature and pressure. Once combined, helium is created with one free neutron from which the energy and heat is derived. The heat then boils water into steam and turns a turbine which generates energy. And a brief history about nuclear fusion because it's been bounced around for quite some time. Back in the 1930s, scientists discovered helium-3 and tritium, and that heavy hydrogen nuclei could be made to react with each other. Back in 1968, the Soviet Union created a nuclear fusion reactor called the tokamak. And the tokamak is a containment device for a nuclear fusion reaction. It uses powerful magnetic fields to confine plasma in the shape of a torus, which has a picture of a tokamak up there. Now, currently, the problem with nuclear fusion is the balance of the temperature required for. At the temperature required for fusion, the fuel is heated to a plasma state of over 10 million degrees Celsius. In this state, it has very good electrical conductivity. This limits the possibility of confining plasma with magnetic fields that works perpendicular to magnetic fields created by the tokamak. So one problem with magnetic confinement is preventing the plasma from being influenced in field lines. Balancing the strength of the magnetic field with low hydrogen atoms to sustain fusion for an extended period of time is currently the challenge.
Okay, let me interrupt for a second. You're really not supposed to bring up the opponent's negatives in your introduction. You're supposed to tell us who you are. You also shouldn't bring up your own drawbacks in your own introduction. So let's learn from that. And I will ask people to leave and not allow them back in this room for the rest of the year. If they can't focus on the debate, keep their mouth shut. And you can record that. Oh wait, we already did. So let's get going into our attacks. Just give me a second. Okay.
Okay, so fission and fusion energy both produce some sort of nuclear waste. However, the waste produced by fission remains harmful and radioactive for 240 times longer than any waste produced by fusion. The United States Regulatory Commission, or USMRC, said that the fission process uses uranium for fuel, which is then split into multiple things that is utilized for energy. And this process creates radioactive isotopes of lighter elements like cesium-137 and strontium-90, as well as heavier ones like plutonium-233. And the cesium and strontium both have half-lives of about 30 years. However, plutonium has a half-life of 24,000 bypass storage units could be target for terrorist attacks. So not only is it a painstaking and expensive process, but they're also very vulnerable.
You said that our waste could it's very much last longer than yours. So the American government right now is currently developing a permanent storage facility for all that waste. So all the waste that is produced by the nuclear reactors would just go there. They wouldn't stay in the pools like you said. And another thing, they found another alternative for the waste. It's called MOX fuel, which is mixed oxide, which is an alternative to the uranium in the reactors that create the waste. And currently France uses this to power its nuclear power plants. And so another alternative is fast neutron reactors. And these reactors have the unique ability to burn through that plutonium instead of creating waste. And and it also burns through all the other undesired radioactive elements during that reaction. And yeah, that's it.
And one of the most promising leads, it's been a recent discovery by a team out of North Carolina. They discovered a way to use solar cells to remove americium from the waste, which is one of the heaviest elements and is also one of the ones with the longest radioactive half-life. So by removing this, you reduce the half-life of the waste, and you also allow the waste to be reprocessed again into MOX fuel, which will go through the reactor, further reducing waste produced and reducing the half-life of that waste as well.
You mentioned that the government is working on creating a storage site for radioactive waste. Currently, that is a solution that works for now, but eventually that facility is going to take capacity, at which point there'll be more and more facilities of that type. You also mentioned that methods are being developed that remove parts of the radioactive waste. This doesn't address the main concern, the fact that it is radioactive waste and that removing parts of it is still harmful.
Okay, and also fusion waste, in addition to not lasting very long, it's also just contained to the building. So once we're fully developed, we won't have to transfer waste to all these different facilities and put people in contact with this.
It goes back to the self-sustaining reaction that your waste will have to be treated away from the facility where ours will stay in the facility until it is processed completely.
Do you go to the second half?
Whenever the conversation is done with that line, or row, go to the next one.
So, ever since the 1970s, when fusion was first looked at as an alternative energy source, we've been told that commercial nuclear fusion is only 40 years away. This has been the running joke among the scientific community, as every year we get told once again, nuclear fusion is only 40 years away. The international community is working on building the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, or ITER. The ITER is being built by 7 countries and will cost an estimated 19 billion euros to complete. This huge expenditure, however, will not result in any power to any power grid in the world, as it is only a theoretical reactor. It will be used only to run experiments, and even if it does yield positive output of energy, this will not go towards any use at all commercially. The best fusion reaction that has ever been produced so far has generated 1.7 times the energy that was put in to start the reaction. The total energy gain, however, was only 1%, meaning that if I put in 100 joules, I get 101 joules back in energy. So it's not very effective at all to commercially generate power. Fission plants, however, produce large amounts of energy, with the smallest reactor in the U.S. operating at 479 megawatts an hour.
All right, you did mention the long-running joke about nuclear fusion just being 40 years away, but I'd just like to talk about some of the break-even points researchers fired laser beams at this canister. We take a pellet filled with deuterium and tritium gas and we place it inside the container. We shoot it with intense laser light and light these inner walls of the cylinder, and it creates a super hot plasma that shuttles the color of soft X-rays. X-rays hit the outer surface of the pellet inside the canister, and it flows, and it's hot enough to create nuclear fusion. Professor Stephen Cowley, CEO of the UK Atomic Energy Authority energy source, said that he could use $20 billion in cash to build a working nuclear fusion reactor. And you did mention that it's very, very expensive research, but what we're talking about here is an energy source that can single-handedly power the entire world. And you guys could too, but we believe that ours is better, so we believe that ours is a better expenditure. And if you look at military spending or other expenditures in the world where funds are being allocated right now for these sort of projects, we believe that putting these things into nuclear fusion would have the result of a nuclear fusion reactor very quickly.
And once it is developed, it'll have all pretty much the benefits of fission energy, but just without the nuclear waste or the possibility
The
of,
long lasting.
yeah, the long lasting. And also, again, be just confined to the building.
And as Jacob touched on in our introduction, there are a lot of centers that are in progress. And another just recent study, this February, researchers at the experimental superconducting tokamak said they were able to heat the gas to nearly 3 times the temperature at the core of the sun, and were able to keep it there for 102 seconds. So with advances in magnetic field research and the design of the tokamak, we think that the design, I'm going to say, challenges that are being presented right now will be overcome.
All right. Well, so the rolling joke about fusion being about 40 years away. Seems like you guys have been at fission for a while, so I assume it's pretty safe, but Chernobyl happened. Let's talk about that. So what went wrong back then? Talked to engineers. They wanted to see if, in case of a power outage, I think you use the electricity generated by a fission plant to continue to pump cooling liquids into your plant. A quick summary, it backfired and too much fuel was allowed through, which caused the coolant system to burst, rupturing the fuel line, which caused another explosion, which released a bunch of radioactive material into the atmosphere. It's actually ionization radiation, which means ionizing radiation transfers a neutral atom into a charged atom, which may bond to another atom, which essentially means it's just knocking a bunch of electrons out of you, making you bond with yourself, which can alter how it reacts chemically and also the function performs within a living organism, which basically is cancer. On-site at Chernobyl, there was many instant deaths for many people and many health problems still today from fission reactors explosion. The explosion created by the nuclear plant resulted in a large amount of radiation exposure over a large, wide area of Europe and Russia alone. Radiation is still very dangerous and can cause genetic mutations and have a negative impact on people's lives. Soviet scientists report that the fourth reactor in Chernobyl released approximately 57 metric tons of uranium dioxide fuel and fission products into the atmosphere. And also genetic mutations can include cancer, which is leukemia, lymphoma, could decrease the size of your brain, mental retardedness, lower IQ, delayed development, blindness, and cleft palate.
Alright, so I'll start by addressing the fact that we have been at this for a while. And over the course of the history of nuclear fission, there have only been 3 accidents that can be cataloged as major accidents. Chernobyl accident occurred due to Soviet isolism as well as improper safety standards. The Soviet-built reactor was improperly designed, and the safety protocols in the Soviet Union at the time were non-existent. In the rest of the modern world, this horrible disaster never would have occurred because we would have had proper safety and inspections beforehand before diving straight in and attempting this. While Chernobyl has caused loss of life, it has been confined to a smaller area, and while there is still background radiation in this area, it is fading over time, and there are areas where people have moved back in and reclaimed land that was originally uninhabitable due to Chernobyl. Overall, the threat of a meltdown is very minor. In 2012, the Japanese earthquake and tsunami led to led to 4 nuclear meltdowns at the Fukushima reactor. These 4 nuclear meltdowns, the radiation was contained within the buildings and the immediate surrounding area, which led to no loss of life due to the reaction, showing that the modern reactors that have been built up to modern code can successfully contain radiation if a reactor would overheat and start a partial meltdown, or as in Japan, 4 complete meltdowns.
You see over in Japan, actually, yes, it was contained to the building, but there was pressure being built up and it took the worst of 2 evils and actually vented that air out of the plant. So yes, some radiation did get out, but none didn't explode, which we did.
We'd also like to acknowledge that, while Chernobyl is the only true nuclear disaster, nuclear fission has caused, the plant was not best built, but the fact is that a nuclear disaster like Chernobyl could happen again at some point. Prior to Chernobyl, records show that over 80% of the children in the area were considered healthy. In 2011, fewer than 20% were considered well. The effect that radiation has on children is pretty drastic. As Jacob said, it causes all kinds of physical and mental defects. And radiation causes genetic mutations that not only affect the individual that is affected by radiation, but their offspring. And these mutations often continue for 7 to 8 generations. And that's where experts say that the death toll on victims of Chernobyl was almost 985,000 victims. And that will continue to spread as genetic mutations are spread across the population. And the list of affected people gets longer.
Now, I just want to say, sometimes people leave a picture up to make an impression, like that last one. But like, when you're kind of done with your pictures, if it's just nothing for a while, you can close the projector screen, open it for the next one.
We'd like to mention the efficacy of our fuel. Our fuel is easy to find, and it is a sustainable yet powerful energy resource. So that's very important when comparing to not nuclear fusion, but other energy sources. Nuclear fusion, as I said, uses 2 hydrogen atoms. Deuterium, the first one is found 1 per part in ordinary seawater, and therefore is globally available, which also eliminates the concern of reaction fuel being readily available in all parts of the world. And while tritium is very rarely found in nature, it can be synthesized in our reactors using lithium, which means that both of our fuel sources are readily available. And we'd also like to mention that it's, as I said, sustainable, and that it's available in seawater. And one out of every 6,000 atoms of hydrogen in ordinary water is deuterium, which in effect gives a gallon of water the energy content of 300 gallons of gasoline. And nuclear fusion has the ability to produce concentrated energy without polluting the environment or posing threats to the Earth and its inhabitants' well-being.
So I would like to add that nuclear fission is able to generate huge amounts of power. One nuclear power plant. This isn't related to fusion since you guys don't have any commercial power plants active yet. But one nuclear power plant is able to produce the same amount of electricity as, I believe it was at least 4 coal-fired power plants, making a fission plant a lot more efficient while producing about 1/8 of the waste as those plants would. So this also helps cut down on our emissions as well, as nuclear fission has 0 greenhouse emissions as it just releases steam from water.
In that same vein, I don't think we're debating that either one of us produces more power because of both nuclear reactions, but I'd also like to mention that, like they said, nuclear fusion does not produce greenhouse gases.
And this is why we're talking about it now as opposed to in the comments section, because this is where you just talk about how good you are. If you can show that you're better than the other side, you can. If you can't, you can't. We still want to mention the pros. If we have more of them or more to say, then it's going to reflect well in the audience. So, feel free to respond to what the other side says, and feel free not to. You don't know exactly what they're saying.
Well, the fission reaction is more of a chain reaction that I guess can be self-sustainable. It can be very dangerous when unkept and not managed properly. Nuclear fusion, on the other hand, is more of a delicate process. It's a balance between pressure and heat and the amount that we feel. Once that gets perfected, I mean, if something would go wrong, it would just stop working. It wouldn't blow up in your face.
What Jacob's trying to say is nuclear fusion is a continuous reaction, and that nuclear fusion stops when its fuel stops.
Fission is if the power gets out and gets hands on the fuel, it's just going to constantly blow up. Because we're not the sun, we don't have the pressure, abundantly surrounding us. We have to condense it with our magnetic electromagnets to push it all together. Without that, it just doesn't work. So then it would get out of hand. It could not, and it just stop.
And then nuclear fission is also able to use multiple sources as fuel. The standard fuel is uranium, but from uranium we can also use plutonium, which is a byproduct of the uranium reaction that we can process through into this box fuel. And then there's also, I believe, another element that is mined that produces a stronger reaction than uranium, but is less commonly used simply because it's different and they don't like to try new things. But it works just as well.
Do you have any further pros there?
Actually, we're done.
Sure. Our conclusion from 1930 with the simple discovery of tritium to sustaining a fusion reaction for under 2 seconds. We are making progress towards our end goal of being completely sustainable and self-reliant on a simple gallon of water. Unlike all the other renewable resources like biomass or hydroelectricity, nuclear fission and fusion can single-handedly handle the world's energy crisis. But nuclear fusion can do it cleaner, more efficiently, and safer once developed. Nuclear fusion will not only meet the current energy demands, but surpass it.
And currently, none of the renewable energy sources are as potent as fossil fuels right now. And it would take a combination of all of these energy sources, and it does take a combination of all of them to meet the world's energy needs, but once fusion is developed, we will be able to meet all of the energy needs on our own.
So for our conclusion, nuclear energy is a well-defined energy resource that often gets a bad rap. Nuclear energy is one of the safest energy types to produce. Nuclear plants have some of the best security available in the world. They also don't release any greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And nuclear fission is also capable of using multiple fuels. And on top of that, it produces much larger amounts of energy per plant than other resources. And all this combines to make nuclear fission the best resource for energy.